who has time to do all of that research, right? Now the third time's the charm. And John is finally ready to present the fruits of his labor with a speech entitled, A Brief History of the Internet. This will be a 5 to 7 minute speech. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for Mr. John Katricak.
Thank you, Eric, and I'll start with a question for all of you. Who invented the internet?
The vice president.
Who built it?
It's really colleges and the military.
Al Gore, right?
Al Gore, he said he did.
Actually, there's a grain of truth
Everybody.
in both of those.
Unless he was lying.
I'll start with the prehistory, but as I said, there is a grain of truth in both of Marshall and Terrell's answers. Prehistory dates back to what is now somewhat jokingly called the Victorian internet, which was telegraphs, because they were, in essence, they were digital, and they were a network of machines that you used to communicate with people at a distance. From there, we did move into the military and educational system, which was called ARPANET in 1969. The group was called DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Project Agency, and they had these local networks of computers set up, but they were looking for a way to communicate with other locations, other universities. The first example of this is between UCLA and Stanford, the colleges. They set up the connection between the two universities, and they called each other on the phone, and we went, okay, I just typed in an L. Do you see the L? Yeah, we see the L. I just typed in an O. Do you see the L? Yeah, we see the L. Okay, I just typed in a G. Hold on, the system crashed. But regardless, they were happy that it still worked in theory. From there, email and, of course, smiley faces, including emails, came shortly thereafter. So for the rest of the 70s and into the 80s, the internet was still just kind of this text-based thing, not in like the green screen systems that we still have here at work, some of you still use, and there's file transfers and bulletin boards and message boards, but not much else. So in the late 80s into the early 90s, there's a man named Tim Berners-Lee at CERN, which is a scientific research outpost in Europe. And I don't know if any of you remember the opening ceremonies of the London Olympics. There's just that odd sketch where they were talking about like teenagers and falling in love in the digital age. And towards the end, they lifted up the house, and there's this 50-some-year-old guy sitting at a computer, and that just kind of added to all the confusion of that sketch. That person, though, was Tim Berners-Lee, the father of web pages and the World Wide Web. What he did is he laid out a system of what's called hypertext, and which is, if you're looking at a web page today, if you see a link, you can click on it, and it takes you to another page. That was all his idea. And from there, we have the start of our web pages today, what's called the World Wide Web, and from there the internet really started to explode. Now, around that same time, we have one Al Gore, who had been following who was in the Senate, and he had been following these research projects. And he proposed a bill called the High Performance Computing Act, which established what he called, and what came to be known by many as the information superhighway, where he said, let's take this small localized thing that's being used in universities and the military and places like CERN, research station, and let's bring it out to the people. Let's allow some commercialization. Let's put in high speed, it's called fiber optic networking, and let's have the government support this new World Wide Web technology by creating its own web browser. That web browser, interestingly enough, started with the name Mosaic, eventually became Netscape, which eventually became Mozilla, which now is Firefox, which I'm sure some of you use. And that all started with this government funded project started by Al Gore. And from there, from the High Performance Computing Act bill, things really exploded. That was 1991. By 1995, we start seeing the e-commerce sites, the Amazons, the eBays, even Craigslist, although Craigslist was still a small local thing at that time. I remember in high school, around that time, we had a little 3.5-inch floppy disks we would pass around. One of the services was called Juno. And all you did in Juno is you logged in, you downloaded your email, you sent off any emails you had waiting in your outbox, and you logged right back off. And that was all Juno did, but it was great because it was free. There's also ICQ, which was one of the very first instant message protocols. None seems to be familiar with these.
Yeah.
From there, also at that time, the first web-enabled phone was a Nokia communicator. Did not look like smartphones, and even makes my phone look very advanced. But still, it could get on the web, it could send emails and do very basic things. Google followed shortly thereafter, even though the first web search engines happened back around the time of Al Gore's bill. And then, of course, the peer-to-peer file sharing, the Napsters, of course, BitTorrent and all those other services. And then at the turn of the century, we started getting into Web 2.0, which is, of course, the socialization and also some of the high-speed media with your Facebooks and your MySpaces and your LinkedIns and your YouTubes. Now for the future, I couldn't tell you what the future will bring. I mean, we're starting to see what's called the Internet of Things, with, you can pull up your phone and you can control the lights or the locks in your house. Or there's talk of self-driving cars, and maybe those self-driving cars can communicate with the car in front of you, so you keep a safe distance. But I couldn't begin to guess what else, because I'm reminded of this quote that's sometimes attributed to Henry Ford, even though it's been disproven. He always said that, well, if I ask people to predict or give me what they want in terms of transportation, they would have said, well, faster horses. So I don't know what the faster horses of tomorrow are in terms of the internet, but I can tell you that thanks to military institutions like DARPA and even people like Al Gore, the internet as we know it is what it is today. Mr. Toastmaster.